Hi, my name's Kathy Skipper and I'm a menopause midwife. Welcome to my channel, The Alchemy of Menopause. In this video, I want to talk a little bit about the person who's been the biggest influence on my work and suggest some of her books to you so that if you are really interested in this deep dive into the feminine psyche and feminine consciousness and looking at how it affects us as we go through midlife and beyond, I wanted to give you a sort of starting point. So, although there are many women who've written brilliant books about the feminine psyche and feminine consciousness since the 60s onwards, I don't want you to get confused. It's always good to have a sort of anchor point. And for me, Marion Woodman has been that woman. You can begin by looking her up. There are some free videos on the internet and a few interviews she's done with different people if you want to get a feel of her beforehand. Um, the book I wanted to talk about the most is called Addiction to Perfection, and it looks very much like this book of hers. It's same color, same format, but it's not the same title. And I've looked all over the house. I can't find it at the moment. And it's, I think, her first or second book. Addiction to Perfection really is a good starting point. Marion Woodman worked with hundreds of women. Many women with eating disorders was her sort of speciality. But her real gift was bringing these deep depth psychology concepts and the work of Jung into the feminine. And she did that brilliantly. And even though her books were written in the 80s mainly, um, you can see as you read them that she was paving the way to where we are today. She worked a lot with women's dreams, women's intuition, women's psychic hunches and instincts. And she was able to read these um, images that came from her individual clients, but also she read them collectively. She was able to see these trends in the feminine psyche, how the feminine psyche was developing and growing and what direction it was taking. And in that work, you can really see her opening doors that we are now finding ourselves faced with. So she's brilliant and she's not at all out of date, even though she passed in her 80s about 5 years ago. So all her books, so I've got, as I said, there's Addiction to Perfection, which I think is probably a really good starting point. Conscious Femininity, which is a book of interviews between her and other people about the feminine consciousness and navigating the feminine consciousness. The Pregnant Virgin, which is really about the caterpillar phase of coming out of being a daughter of patriarchy into being a sovereign woman. The Ravaged Bridegroom, which is about the masculine in the feminine psyche. And there are others. I couldn't find them all today. I have got them all. But all of them are really on the same theme, and that is what is the feminine psyche and how do we navigate it, and what is needed collectively in the world today in terms of finding that balance between the feminine psyche and the masculine. So she begins most of her books with this idea that I think is really coming into the collective consciousness today, which is how women have been robbed of their real femininity. And they've been robbed through their real femininity because they have been educated and told that the way to get on and be accepted in life and have abundance is through following masculine goals and a masculine roadmap to attain those masculine goals. And the parody is that patriarchal's views of what masculine goals are and the roadmap isn't even doing masculinity in its truest, most sacred form a favor anyway. Both the divine feminine and the sacred masculine have been ostracized and deeply damaged by this patriarchal power system that we're still in the death throes of. Hopefully, it's the death throes. So she describes the state of women in the time that she was writing, which was the 80s mainly. But we are still in that state. And I think that is why menopause is really pushing us to use the hormonal triggers that affect us on all levels of the psyche to get us out of this terrible state of imbalance where women have adopted masculine values. And by adopting these masculine values, masculine goals, masculine roadmaps, women have alienated themselves from their own femininity. Hard thing to say, and it's true. And the only way back is to go into the underworld, is the deep dive that I believe is the gift of menopause, and reclaim these parts that are often, as I've said before, terrifying to face at first, because we have learned that they're dangerous. They are, there's something wrong with them. They are to be repressed because they are not welcome. So the whole undoing and then re-sewing these bits back together. So the book that I suggest you read first is The Addiction to Perfection, is really, you could say, a book about the addiction to masculinity and masculine values in a masculine society. And if we don't break that addiction, we can see where we're going, straight towards the wall. We can see where that addiction has brought us. And that's not blaming women or blaming ourselves, but it is to say, hey, can't we see what we've done by being addicted to these masculine patriarchal views that have made things so imbalanced that we're destroying Mother Earth? So the way that we've, in a way, yes, talking about Mother Earth, the way that we've alienated ourselves from her and treated her as something that just to be pillaged, used, raped, made profit from, is exactly what we've done to our own bodies. We've alienated ourselves from the wisdom of the feminine body, from the deep depths of what it is to be in that feminine matter and following the feminine cycles. And we've focused and become hyper rational, hyper goal orientated, hyper linear. You know, it's a joke. So this denial, this fundamental denial of the self and the feminine soul. Don't forget spirit, which is really, you know, our ability to think, our ability to be out of the body, in a sense, needs to be balanced by the soul. So spirit and soul, both aspects of, could call it the divine, but they need to be balanced. The soul is embodied, it's the feminine aspect of our divinity, and spirit is the masculine aspect, and they need to come together in union. But instead we've really made a cult out of spirit, and now we outsource our whole self and psyche onto a phone, not even embodied at all, not even a little bit. And that is frightening. And this fundamental denial of the self forces us, in what Marion Woodman says, is this pursuit of perfection. And this pursuit of perfection is to be perfect in a patriarchal world. Be perfect women. Look perfectly how the masculine has decided, or the patriarch has decided women. I mean, we see that today. All this filling and changing of our faces and our bodies and cutting them around, and it's become this huge, not just industry, but trend, is really that pursuit for the perfection that patriarchy has made women believe is their way of having value of themselves in the world. And this all comes now, Marion Woodman, this is key. And I did a few videos back about the mother wound. So it's really joins up to it. But it's key is that Marion Woodman says this comes, unfortunately, from the negative mother, the death mother. The mother who has refused or been unable to heal herself and reclaim the lost feminine within herself. She's bought into patriarchy and the patriarchal system, and she educates her daughter like that. It is more important to the negative mother to educate her daughter to fit into the patriarchal system, even if it means negating, repressing deep parts of her daughter's psyche. And this happens at a very, very early age. It's unconscious. Nobody's doing it consciously, but it happens. And Marion Woodman also pointed out that this negative mother complex is rife in our world today, and I would say it's getting even more rife. It's huge. And so, because these mothers are unable to adequately nurture themselves, they can't nurture their daughters in a way that would really nurture the feminine. And they place these expectations that I've just been talking about how to fit into and be perfect in patriarchy onto their children. Um, and so the child, although cognitively doesn't understand what's happening, loves the mother. Mother's her soil, her sense of self, her sense of survival. Deep down, the child's soul recognizes that she is being loved conditionally. She's not being loved unconditionally. She's not being loved for every aspect of herself. She's being loved for how she can fit in to this patriarchal system. And the parts of herself that don't fit in are not being loved, they're being rejected. And this brings rage. So any woman who feels a lot of rage at her mother and thinks, God, I'm a really bad woman. Why am I feeling this? I shouldn't feel this to my mother. And the mother often says, I do it all for you. I love you so much. This is all for you. I devoted my life to you. As long as you do what I tell you in the way that I want you to. So there's this dynamic, and it's incredibly destructive for the individual woman or girl growing up and then woman, but also for the collective. So these women often are very successful in society. They grew up to be very efficient, very professional. They do everything right. They get the right studies. They go and get the right job. They buy the right house. They marry the right man. But inside, they know deep down they have had to abandon parts of themselves. There's a huge hole. Something has been rejected within them. And deep down, even if the mother dies and if they don't do this work, she's still alive within them. Even if the daughter marries and goes halfway around the world with her family, she has internalized this negative mother. And so she carries on trying to be perfect in this matriarchal world because that is her initial programming. So there's a lot of unprogramming to do at menopause to be able to face this, to cut the ties that bind, to work on and see the patterns and how this happened, and see the patterns and how this happened through generations. That's why the motherline work is so important. So basically, this is also why when women get to the menopausal journey, if they really listen to themselves, they can sense that inauthenticity. They sense that frustration that they're not being wholly themselves, that they're starving in relation to themselves. They may be everything in relationship to the masculine: beautiful, sporty, professional, wealthy, everything, intelligent. But inside, their relationship to their deepest part of themselves, the deepest feminine, is craving that connection. It's starving. They're starving to death. And their real true desires remain unacknowledged either, or there are women who haven't become the professionals and successful in that way, but have become the perfect mothers, doing the same thing as their mothers did, creating children who are once again going to abandon parts of themselves to fit into the perfect family. So, abandoning this truest, most authentic part of ourself is absolute disaster for ourselves and for the world. The feminine needs its equal place in the world. Everything needs to be in its rightful place. We need balance between the feminine and masculine. If we can't have balance in ourselves, we'll never find it in the world, which is why this work is so important for ecological and social and planetary healing, which is why menopause today in 2025 is something that needs to be taken super seriously. So, what else? Yes, and so Marion Woodman in Addiction to Perfection says that what happens is, because there's this external perfection or striving for perfection, this also actually will often end up in some form of addiction to try and fill that hole or that lack of connection between parts of inside oneself. And so one of the things that I really liked about Marion's work is that she always looked for the metaphor in the addiction. So as I said, she worked with lots of people with addictions or food difficulties, women with food problems, and she said that women who had problems with food, anorexia, bulimia, this for her symbolized that there was often a mother problem to look at. Mother is how we nurture ourselves, how we nourish ourselves, how we feed ourselves, how we have the energy to take ourselves into life. And so food is often connected to the mother. Alcohol, on the other hand, is a lack of connection with spirit somehow, or a need to be in spirit, to need to be more in spirit than they already are. Spirit has become like the god. And so instead of trying to find that balance with spirit, so spirit can penetrate the soul or the feminine matter, the woman gets lost in spirit, in alcohol. Cocaine, she made the analogy of cocaine with the need for light, more light out of the body. The body doesn't mean anything. It needs to be more and more in spirit, or more and more with the cocaine in the light. Remember what Jung said, if we're more and more in the light and in spirit, our shadow and the depths become more and more controlling because we don't have a relationship with them. They're in the unconscious and they control us. And then addiction to sex, this need for union. Really, the union is within us, the sacred union of masculine and feminine, but we're looking for it outside ourselves. So, these are archetypal messages really of what the soul needs. I think one question you could journal on, do art about, poetry about, is what today, as you go through this midlife journey to becoming the best version of yourself, the most whole and deeply authentic version of yourself, what does your soul need? And asking the question is just as important as answering it. The unconscious will answer it. It'll be answered in your dreams. It'll be answered through your intuition and your hunches and synchronicities. You don't have to worry about answering it with the left brain. What you do need to do is ask the right questions. What does your soul need? What is your soul yearning for? Okay. So in order to heal this sense of lack or lack of connection with the self, or this hole that women feel, or this yearning, or this inauthenticity, we must come to terms with our own humanity as women, as the feminine, our own feminine identity. What is it, a feminine psyche? No one's taught us. All the studies they do in the world are on men. And the men's psyche in psychiatry, even in physical attributes of the human body, 99% of the studies are done on men. What is the feminine psyche? How do we navigate the feminine psyche? What is missing and I need to go back and reclaim? What frightens me of the feminine psyche? Bring that inquisitive questioning to those questions, and they will be answered. The feminine psyche herself will answer them. That's what's needed in the world today. That's what's happening. What else? Yeah, and we need to build trust with it. We need to start to really listen. And as we listen and we go on our hunches and we work with our dreams and we do artwork and poetry and in nature, and we see how these things fit together in a feminine way, not in a linear way like the hero's journey, but in a feminine way. I've done a video on the heroine's journey, how we find these little bits and they magically fit together like a intricate sewing together of a beautiful quilt out of fragments of life. That's how we bring them together, and there's a magic in that. We don't know how they're going to come together. It's not linear, but they do. And there's a calling for them to come back and integrate. We're integrating the fragments of the feminine. That's what's happening in the world today. And in order to do that, be true to your feelings, no matter what. Don't doubt your feelings with your ego or your mind or your educated self. Drop down. Feel it. Feel your womb. Feel your sexual organs. Feel the deep embodied feminine leading the way. And that's really your only defense against this overdeveloped patriarchal value system that we're all faced with at the moment. Our true defense is using the opportunity that menopause brings us through the hormonal changes that change us physically, but also emotionally, mentally, spiritually. Use this natural maturation process of becoming a wise, mature woman to reclaim your feminine identity, your authentic feelings, your true embodied knowing. That's the only way we can bring the feminine back to her rightful place. Lots of love. So, yeah, before I go, no, I showed you these books. Any of Marion Woodman's books are worth starting with. And the other thing about them is, don't read them and think, oh God, I didn't understand half of that. Read them in small bits. Work on a paragraph. Work on a point that touches you. Stop there and just journal on it. Think about it. Reflect on it. And keep these books. These are reference books. These aren't books that you read once. I've read them loads of times, and every time I see them, I want to go back and read them because there's always something more. Marion Woodman wrote in a very cyclic way. She did not write in a linear way. She wrote like a woman. Okay, If you tap in the link in my bio, you will be able to access a free, beautiful guided journey where you'll meet 7 generations of the women who went before you, and 3 of them have a gift for you. And I think that's a really beautiful way of putting this work into context and beginning this work. So if you're interested in that, that's in the bio. Please subscribe to my channel and comment, share, ask questions. Let's make a conversation about this very, very important subject. Lots of love.